All right, a happy Tuesday. Hopefully everyone is doing great out there. We weren't going to do any trade guide videos today, but I figured might as well, because every time we do one, I always get a reply. I never really check messages, but I get a reply from a Sacramento fan. He's like, "What? You're not going to do a Kings video today?" And I said, "Well, we might as well try to crank out a couple here." It's relatively quiet on the trade front. It's remarkably quiet. You talk to teams, and it's basically kind of the same message that it is pretty quiet, and it's going to be interesting as far as how this progresses over the next week and a half, especially where the new rules are coming into place starting in the off season. Myself and Tim Bontemps are going to have an article out next week. We project at least a third of the teams that are going to be in this first and second apron, which is really picture like the government, half of the government. I know a lot of people don't want to talk about the government. Half of the government shutting down. That's basically what's going to happen from a roster standpoint, as far as adding outside of your own players and players on minimum contracts or the draft. But we'll do a video about that next week. But I wanted to do one about Sacramento. Certainly last year's darling. This year hanging on in the top 6 of the Western Conference. Certainly the bar has been set higher. Getting into the first round and winning 48 or 49 games is not good enough, I would say, compared to what last year when they kind of just snuck up on everyone. And I have them as a 7 on the. I feel like I'm doing like a pizza review. I feel like I have them as a 7 on the trade guide meter here. Just because there's a lot of different ways they can go. Certainly, we heard some things about them in Siakam, and what you have to worry about Sacramento here, and not just Sacramento, but a lot of these teams here, is the ability to add a third max guy to your roster. When you have Domantas Sabonis, who's is on a max contract next year, and you have De'Aaron Fox on Wendy calls it the fun max, this 25% max. And then if Fox is named All-NBA, and it's going to be tough sledding there, the cost to add a third guy becomes increasingly expensive, and then prohibited as far as how you build out the rest of your roster. So when Keegan Murray becomes extension eligible, and you already had a third max guy, now all of a sudden does he become your fourth max guy? Kind of like what Denver is doing right now. And yeah, the Denver model is perfect because they were able to kind of build out a little bit of their back end of their bench, and they still had KCP, and they still had Aaron Gordon here. So when you're looking at how you build out and I know we're talking about the trade guide, how you build out a perfect roster, there's nothing perfect about Sacramento, but it's close to how it's supposed to be done as far as under this new CBA. When you have a player like Harrison Barnes and you have a player like Kevin Huerter, and then it basically filters down to Trey Lyles and Chris Duarte and Davion Mitchell and some of your younger players there, and then you've got a group of players on minimum contracts. The biggest thing for me, as far as from a trade deadline, is the front court. Okay, and it's funny we're doing this because if I had done this 2 weeks ago, and this is how fluid it is in the league. It's like Harrison Barnes, right? He's on a good contract, but he needs to go. He hasn't been playing well. What do we can we combine him and Huerter for $32 million and get a $33 million player back? And for me, it's like I would just be careful as far as making trades during the regular season are extremely difficult, because this is what I ask in the Sacramento trade guide. Has the current roster already peaked with its potential? It's debatable. As far as, and we'll learn a lot more about the playoffs, and then I think you're probably going to have to address it. The answer to that, okay, is easier to evaluate in the offseason after a second consecutive playoff appearance and not in early February, because one misguided trade, and Sacramento can go from being that 5th seed to all of a sudden being that 8th or 19th, or a team that's in the play-in, and then they lose in the play-in, and then we'll figure it out we probably should have stayed pat here. And I think as constructed, this Sacramento team is the top 6 team. Do I have concerns? Certainly at the end of games, down the stretch. If it's basically Fox and Sabonis, and then if Murray's not going as far as from a supporting cast, yeah, I mean, you could say that about any team here. As I said, tweaking the roster around Sabonis, Fox, and Murray, who's extension eligible in the 2025 offseason, and then would kick in 26, is going to get awfully expensive here. They have 12 players earning between $2 and $17 million. That is the perfect formula as far as how you build around 2 max players. My concern with moving off Kevin Huerter is that you got Malik Monk as a free agent. Okay? You move off his number, and now Malik Monk's a free agent. You sign Monk to a 2-year contract prior. He has early bird rights. The most you can sign him is up to $17 million. Okay? Do I think Malik Monk is a $17 million player? Maybe. Do I think he's a $20 million player? No. Process of elimination. You just eliminate unless one of these teams like Detroit and Charlotte are just going to come in and offer him 4 for $80. Who knows? When you're desperate, they might do that. So that's my concern, is that you move off Kevin, and then all of a sudden a team like Detroit comes in and offers him 4 for $80, and he's like, yeah, I'm coming off a 2-year, $19 million contract. Then who do you have playing shooting guard? So that's what you have to look at as far as when you are looking at Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter or one of these other players here, is that who is going to become a free agent on your roster here. And I know these trade guide videos, everybody wants to know like who's getting traded, but there is a philosophy behind all this here as far as the business part of it. And listen, I would love just to talk about NBA and X's and O's and who fits and stuff, but there is a business component with this new collective bargaining agreement where teams are not going to try to be like Denver and have 3 or 4 players on max, because it puts a lot of pressure on your roster here. I know Jeremy Grant is the sexy name out there, right? I would love Jeremy's contract if it descended, right? If it went like 29, 27, 25, 23, somewhere like that. My concern is that what you're going to have to give up. I would think, and I'm just giving hypotheticals based on he's got a value contract, although it does increase. 2 number ones. Remember, you owe Atlanta a top 14 protected first. You can't trade a first until the earliest 2026. Do you want to leave yourself draft exposed as far as what that's going to be? It would certainly be Barnes and Huerter. Hypothetical to make the money work as far as what you're looking at in 2 ones. Man, that is an awfully rich package. Because then what happens is that 2 years from now, when Jeremy Grant is in the 3rd year of his contract, you're going to have Fox, Sabonis, max, and then basically Murray and Grant on 2 $30 million deals. And then what else do you have? You don't have draft picks anymore because you've already traded them. You don't have any of your younger players basically anymore. So you have to be careful when you're addressing the front court. That's why Siakam never made sense. It never made sense as far as giving up 2 players for a $40 million player, and then you're going to be top heavy again. So be careful as far as what you are going to do as far as what your Sacramento. I mean, you could do, certainly minor moves, and I would say, Davion Mitchell all of a sudden kind of comes back to, into the rotation here. Did that make sense moving off him? When you have guys on rookie contracts, you have to be careful as far as moving off that. Listen, Monty McNair, their general manager, Wes Wilcox, their assistant GM, have been aggressive. 17 trades in their tenure. They traded, remember everyone knows Sabonis, Halliburton. They added Trey Lyles, 2 separate deals. That was 2022. Last trade they made was last regular season was trading $2.6 million in cash to Brooklyn for Kessler Edwards. Okay, so not as aggressive last year. I put in here, trades we'd like to see: Barnes, Mitchell, and a first for 2 years after the Atlanta first for Grant. Like, I would consider that, because then at least I have Huerter to move in the offseason here. Like that, I would consider if it doesn't cost me more than a first, I think it probably would, just based on how well Grant has played in Portland and the rush to move off. They've got an open roster spot. They're well below the luxury tax, $18.4 million. Barnes got a 15% trade bonus. They can swap first in 27, 28, 29, and 30. We talked about the Atlanta first. 2 years after it's conveyed, they've got 5 seconds to move. So that's kind of in a nutshell, as far as a Sacramento trade guide video. Everything you can find is on ESPN.com as far as where they are. But I would just be careful moving multiple parts in season, because how this Western Conference is, man, the standings change every day. And you can go from the 5th seed, as I said, to the 8th seed or the 9th seed if you go on one of these slides, because you're going to go out and get a high-level player, and then you got to integrate him in there, and you're already moving 2 players, and then you've lost 4 in a row all of a sudden. That's why the Harden trade for the Clippers was brilliant at the time, because they had him at the end of October to integrate him the whole year. So that's it on Sacramento. Hopefully everyone is doing great, and we will talk soon.